Hello, and welcome to the Life Changing Moments podcast. This is the last episode in our four-part series where we've been exploring the journeys of chief wellness officers from leading healthcare systems. In previous episodes, we had the privilege of hearing from Drs. Mila Felder of Advocate Health, Dr. Christina Bowen of ECU Health, and Dr. Christine Hine of Maine Medical Center. If you haven't had the chance to listen to those episodes yet, and you could use a dose of optimism about the state of healthcare today, I highly recommend giving them a listen. There are times in our lives that change the way we see the world. Navigating these challenges can take insight, trusted confidants, or even a coach. Let's explore those moments. In this companion podcast to RX for Success, we will discover ways to learn and write our own success stories together. I'm Dr. Dale Waxman, a physician coach with MD Coaches, and this is Life Changing Moments. To close out this series, today I'm excited to have Dr. Gaurav Agarwal, the Chief Wellness Executive for Northwestern Medicine and the Director of Faculty Wellness for Northwestern University. Dr. Agarwal specializes in occupational and organizational psychiatry with an emphasis on workplace mental health. Thanks to his training and extensive experience, as you'll hear, he is well primed to bring his expertise and perspective to the role of Chief Wellness Officer. In addition to his administrative and clinical roles, Dr. Agarwal is nationally recognized as an educator and is the recipient of multiple awards for teaching. Additionally, he's a certified leadership, organizational, and well-being coach. I invite you to listen to Dr. Agarwal's keen articulation of the factors that influence physician well-being and how attention to all simultaneously is important to success. Listen for the canary and the coalmine analogies, as well as Dr. Agarwal's 2 T's to attend to improve well-being. So, Dr. Gaurav Agarwal, welcome to Life Changing Moments.
Thank you for having me, Dale. I really appreciate it.
And as I understand it, you're in the Chicago area.
I am. Yep. I'm down at Northwestern and right in the heart of Chicago.
Great. So along those lines, can you just tell us a bit about your background and what your current role is there in the Chicago area?
Sure. I am a psychiatrist and a physician coach, and my specialty in psychiatry is a thing called occupational and organizational psychiatry. And basically, it's really just the study of workers and workplaces and how to help both of them achieve optimum potential. And that clinical niche led me to be working with what we call impaired professionals. And impaired professionals are people that, because of a mental illness, oftentimes substance abuse, it could be cognitive issues, could be depression, anxiety, etc., are no longer able to work safely. And the folks that I specialize with are called safety-sensitive professions, which means professions where other people's safety is dependent on whether you can do your job. So think doctors, pilots, judges, nurses, pharmacists. And so that was my clinical practice. Through that clinical practice, I had the great privilege of meeting people from around the country who had become impaired and could no longer practice safely, oftentimes, and mostly in the field of medicine. As I would talk to them and sort of what I call reverse engineer their story, because there was a moment with all of them where they'd be like, I can't believe this is happening to me. I have never thought in my wildest dreams I'd ever see someone like you for the things I'm seeing you for. And I said, I totally agree. I'm trying to understand how we got here too. And so then they would sort of take me through their story. And that sort of created this database, if you will, in my head of about 1,000 healthcare workers who had become impaired. And I started seeing recurring patterns and themes of these moments that were pitfalls in their lives. And I said, well, I'm a big believer in mistakes are part of life and you learn from them. But I'm also a big believer that I don't need to make every mistake. And if there's a way that I can learn from others and prevent myself from making those mistakes or help others not make those mistakes, or be on the lookout for those pitfalls, I should say, then that might be very useful in a preventative end. And that's sort of where this journey of being passionate about well-being and helping keep our healthcare workers at prime functioning began for me.
It sounds like there was this shift from the not end stage, but people become impaired and shifting more towards prevention. It's like, what can we learn that we can actually insert into, in your case, it sounds like organizationally, what can we insert into the organization that could prevent impairment? Am I getting that right?
That's right. And the outcomes for folks that had become impaired is quite good in healthcare. Actually, it's one of the highest in terms of recovery. And that feels great. Obviously, it feels like you've really made a difference in someone's life. Having said that, it's still painful. The damage that is done by the time people saw me in our colleagues' lives personally and professionally is painful. It's expensive. It's time consuming. And so for me, yes, rehabilitation is very meaningful. But I felt like if there was a preventative aspect that I could be a part of, that they never have to see me or never have to go through that pain, that would bring me great meaning. And that's where I wanted to get involved in. I also tell a story. I'm the son of a coal miner. My dad came to this country in the late 70s and was a coal miner. And you would hear the sort of adage about canaries in a coal mine. And that's pretty well known. And one of my patients told me once, he said, you're sort of into that well-being stuff, aren't you? And I said, yeah. He said, I don't think any of it's going to work because all you guys do is try to make stronger canaries. Until someone's willing to fix the coal mine, it's not going to be enough. And so probably given my background and having heard that saying in a different context most of my life, that resonated with me. And I said, you know what, I'd like to be a part of making better coal mines. And that's really been my mission since then.
Well, that kind of answered my next question. What enabled you to get into the role that you're now in? And I think I got it correct, as the Chief Wellness Officer for Northwest.
Yeah, Chief Wellness Executive, for Northwestern Medicine. And, I would say when people ask me that question, it sounds like it's, a very linear thing. And I just like to correct people's minds because I think then other people expect that that's what should happen. Hey, I should be able to go from point A to point B. And it was far more circuitous than that. For me, I took those stories I told you about and I sort of distilled them down to what are like these 6 or 7 pitfalls that keep showing up. And I created a professional development curriculum for our medical students. For medical students, if it's not on step 1, they tend to not care, right? Their job is to get past step 1, get that residency. And if it's not really going to help you in that journey, then it's really hard to get their attention. And so for me, I was a little worried it's not on step 1. But what I told them was, I said, listen, I told them exactly what I told you. I said, listen, I know it's not on step 1, but this is not like some made up thing. These are the stories of the people that have come before you. And that can save you a great amount of heartache if you can learn from the folks that have gone before you. And I think that something about the fact that they were real amalgams of real stories helped grab their attention. And so that's where we started in the medical school professionalism and sort of wellness development world that caught people's attention. And so I started doing some work with the graduate medical education folks. And that was very fulfilling and interesting. But there's a concept called the hidden curriculum, which is there's the stuff we teach, sort of explicitly, and then there's the stuff that they learn implicitly by watching. And for me, I felt like, yes, the stuff I was building for the real curriculum, the explicit curriculum was being received well. But I also felt like I was going to lose because what they were seeing in the hidden curriculum was going to be stronger. What they're seeing from their role models on the wards was going to be stronger. And so I said, I've really got to get to the faculty. I've got to get to the actual healthcare system. It's better to be lucky than good, I suppose, but timing matters. And there was an opportunity to get involved with the healthcare system and get involved with more operational work. And that led to becoming the director of physician well-being. And then the pandemic happened. some of the credibility we had built, the value we had demonstrated with our physicians, they said, well, everyone's traveling now. It's the pandemic. How would you think about working with our nurses, our APPs, working with everyone? And so we started doing some work just sort of informally there. And that really sort of led to an understanding that, this is not something that's just for physicians. In fact, the team is what matters in healthcare systems. And so this role that's overseeing everybody came to be.
Are you a doctor struggling to provide the best care for your patients while dealing with financial and caregiving matters out of the scope of your practice? Do you find yourself scrambling to keep up with the latest resources and wish there was an easier way? Then this virtual caregiver conference resource will save you time, money, and sanity by giving you all the resources and information your patients need in one place. This conference helps you and your patients enlist the best strategies around healthcare resources and the best financial steps for your patients while navigating caregiving situations. You don't have to go home feeling frustrated and helpless because you couldn't connect your patients with the best services. Find out more at jeanniedoherty.com or click in the link in the show's notes. You don't want to miss this caregiver resource.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests. Whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics, Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. After spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan/MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
It sounds like you are attending to both the Canaries and the Coalmine. You're doing both.
It's true. And to be honest, that wasn't totally the goal. As I said, I'm a psychiatrist and a coach, and my whole career has been tending for the Canaries, as you say. But I was sort of nervous when I started this other sort of aspect of my life, that because I'm a psychiatrist, because I'm a coach, that people would think that, oh, his angle is going to be, making stronger Canaries. That's what he is. That's what his training is. And so I probably overcorrected. But I said, that's really not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the Coalmine. And so we try to really carve out a focus there. Truthfully, I think the pandemic happened and you had no choice, because no matter how good that Coalmine was going to be, the pandemic is overwhelming, and it was going to cause some workers to experience distress, some workers to experience disease, and we had to have something to take care of people right then and there. And so that sort of expanded the resources of our programming, because we said, yes, we want to make stronger coal mines, but that's going to take time. And right now the coal mine is changing so rapidly that we're just trying to keep our head above water. So we're going to have to provide support for the Canaries too.
I think what I want to explore a little deeper with both of these, both Canaries and coal mines, what are the biggest challenges this day and age for the Canaries, for the healthcare professional? And then we'll come back and ask the question about what are the biggest challenges for well-being for the coal mine or for the healthcare system.
Yeah, I think the thing when you're working with the Canaries is you realize that every Canary's got their own thing going on. And so I understand the question. I just feel like for me, it's been a lesson of really recognizing the uniqueness of each healthcare workers, right? For me, and the way I think about things, stress is cumulative, well-being is cumulative. And so your work is just one part of your life. But our brains don't care. They don't delineate that this is professional stress versus my mom's sick at home, or I've got a new kid on the way, or my marriage is struggling. It's all of those things sort of go together to create the total burden on someone's life and brain. And so for me, it's been really interesting to watch the nuances and subtleties about what is causing the issue, because the first data point that I always had to sort of account for was, if you looked at burnout or mental health outcomes, there's about at least, roughly 50 to 60% of people that were not burnt out in the same coal mine, in the same system, oftentimes in the same department, in the same hospital. And so what's happening there? Because it's absolutely true, there's a systems issue, but what is causing the differential outcomes? And that's always been of great interest to me. And I think the only answer I can come up with is that, if you look at people's lives, they're managing things differently. What they're passionate about matters. And so, as a coach yourself, I think it'll resonate with you. For me, I spend a lot of time with our colleagues talking about sort of career crafting and life crafting. Because what I know is true for a lot of my peers is the process to become a physician in this case is challenging. And you sort of just keep your head down, and every 4 years you pray that they let you into the next stepping stone, whether it's college or med school or residency or fellowship. And then when you're finally done, you sort of wake up, you're probably around, in your 30, and you're like, oh, I don't remember what I was chasing. I just knew I was chasing something. And what is it that I want? What makes me happy? What do I want to spend more of my time doing now? What do I want to spend less of my time doing now? And then the phases of life start as well. And so for me, I think from a personal wellness standpoint, I spend so much time helping people try to be really clear about what is it that you want versus what society told you wanted, or what you thought you wanted at a different time in your life, or what there was other external pressures. Because when people are clear about that, I think they also can then advocate for themselves within those systems much more effectively, and not sort of end up chasing their tail a little bit.
I really like how you answered that question, that it really is very individual, which is one of the reasons why some of these healthcare systems in early days of addressing well-being were, unfortunately, it was sort of blaming the victim, and they would sort of have yoga classes and say, oh, this will fix you and all that. But it really is very individual. And then within that, before we get to the coal mine stuff, you mentioned earlier that you've come up with some factors, if you will, that seem to be present for a lot of physicians that you have brought some awareness to medical students. We all go through the same training, and maybe those factors are something to attend to. Can you say a little bit about those factors?
What we found was there was certain things that seemed to be more common, or certain life moments where the stress sort of became overwhelming, and people would often, that would be the moment that people would say, hey, this is where things took a turn. And what you saw was this concept of imposter phenomenon was quite high, right? This idea of fixed mindset versus sort of growth mindset, where we tend to be more fixed mindset. We're high performers at pretty early ages. We're sort of thought of as smart as a sort of fixed trait instead of, hey, you know what, people are putting in the work. They're doing well on tests, not just because of some innate talent, but because they're putting in the work. But you sort of get labeled as smart, and so that becomes an identity, which then you sort of have to live up to for the rest of time, it seems, which leads to some of these sort of difficulties around self-confidence, self-doubt, and that can lead to sort of perfectionism tendencies and that anxiety that people try to avoid because that we're human, whether that's using substances or other things to help calm that anxiety. That's sort of a different thing, but it's all sort of based around this idea of, you know, how do I manage these sort of pressures that I feel. You also saw these sort of interesting moments, you know, not necessarily unique to us, but when problems would arise around financial issues, partnership agreements, marital issues, infidelity, parental death was actually sort of fairly unique. You saw, you know, a fair number of folks that go into med school have parental pressures or parental role models that led to that. And then when you lose that figure, it was sort of interesting for me to watch how often that was the time where you know, you sort of had this existential crisis that would then lead to, you know, sort of acting out behaviors. And so those are some of the types of things we started observing and wanted to highlight for people is when should you be alert for you may need some extra support out there.
Nice. That's really great and very helpful for our listeners and for me too, just to be in awareness of that. I still do some work in academics. I work with residents predominantly. Let's switch to the Coalmine itself. What are the biggest challenges facing you and your role in terms of really getting healthcare professional well-being to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I've learned over the years is this is just one gigantically challenging change management exercise in an industry that's not really designed to change that well. The pressures of that other industries face, which was what forces them to have to constantly adapt and evolve and change, don't exist in the same way. You're always going to need healthcare. That's never going to change. And so the industry pressures are different. The payer concept that we have is very different in that the patient you're seeing isn't necessarily the customer, right? Because they're not the ones paying. So there's this third party between the person paying and the person receiving the service that sort of, I think, distorts some market figures. And I'm not a healthcare economist, and so someone out there may say, hey, you know what, you don't understand it, and I would defer to the experts. But just anecdotally, what I see with my own eyes is that seems to be different. Is if I'm a customer in anything else, if I'm not happy with the service, I have a lot of ability to change that. It doesn't seem to me that system works that well in healthcare. And you know, you see this with the technology, right? You know, that everyone sort of heard this, but I mean, who uses fax machines anywhere else but healthcare still? Why am I faxing a form into a nursing home or a pharmacy? That's just not normal. And yet we use these, you know, antiquated things, I think, because change is so difficult, which for us is now becoming problematic because the workload is so high. The aging population, just the growth in population. And so with the workload that's become so high, if we don't change how we actually handle and manage that workload, that leads to a lot of operational problems and challenges for which the solution tends to be work harder. But I'm much more interested in working smarter than I am working harder.
Well, along those lines, and I'm just thinking globally now, what are some of the innovative approaches or technologies that may hold promise for enhancing healthcare professional well-being?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always say that the only solutions I see are the two T's, technology and teamwork. And so under the technology bucket, you can't really talk about technology without talking about AI these days. But I actually do, and I'm not an early adopter necessarily, but I actually do see great promise. We're seeing, you and I, before we got on the call, we're talking about what is this Zoom AI? But you're seeing, these technologies take away some of those administrative burdens that we've been talking about in healthcare for a long, long time. The ability to record and summarize meetings, family meetings, end of life issues meetings. These are very long meetings that required a ton of documentation, but if that can all be sort of taken away and simplified, you can imagine how that might free people up. You see these ambient AI scribes out in the market. And again, they're early and this technology is going to get a lot better in my view. But even the early stuff is allowing clinicians to go back to the heart of practicing bedside medicine and looking at our patients and, not sitting there being dictation folks, but truly being present with someone, which I think is healing in and of itself. And all the medicine aside, I think just being present and bearing witness to someone else is incredibly healing. And so if we can return to that, meaning and purpose are incredibly protective of this industry. This industry's got its flaws, but I think the big advantage it has is I'm not pushing paper. I'm not doing something that I think doesn't add any value to the world. I know that what I'm doing matters to some other human being's life. And it's just a question of, can we make sure and emphasize that meaning and purpose rather than get buried in the minutia of the administrative stuff, et cetera. And so I think those technologies have great promise for us. On the teamwork end, this is the major change, right? Is you went from a bunch of small businesses to basically an employed physician model and within these large healthcare systems. And so that change happened actually quite rapidly. And I think we're actually still digesting it. Is what does that mean for your role in this system? And it's not just you get to do whatever you want, right? We have to intentionally, deliberately, really design carefully, what do all the players that deliver healthcare do best? And how do we make sure they're doing the things that they do best to deliver care as a collective team? People talk a lot about that, but it really is hard work building teams. They don't just magically happen. And there's a lot of skills that go into building high functioning teams that, I didn't learn anywhere in college or med school or residency. And so, where can we add value around that to help people that may not naturally get that sort of training in other places stand up these high performing teams to be able to provide care to our patients?
Let's bring it back to the professionals themselves. How can physicians especially take proactive steps to manage their own well-being, especially if they're noticing that they're not doing well?
Again, to me, my brain works in frameworks, and I think about, what are some of these frameworks where for this specific person, things might be out of whack. And then we sort of go down that particular driver, if you will. And one thing that I think is a driver for all of us is financial wellness, actually. I see a lot of folks that I think get trapped a little bit because, again, this is one of those things where, especially in the physician realm, you wake up one morning and your salary changes quite a bit and you've received very little to no training in personal finance. You've sort of had this long period of delayed gratification. And so it's not surprising that people sort of, go a little bit crazy with the newfound wealth and they're feeling a little bit, they and their families are feeling deprived. And so you sort of throw money at it and say, hey, you know what, I can't be here for your soccer game, but I'm happy to buy you something and to make sure, to make up for my absence if I'm working, et cetera. And that leads to a lot of trouble because it becomes sort of the cyclical problem. you have to make X amount of dollars to support your lifestyle. But to make X amount of dollars, you have to work more than you want to work and in ways that you don't want to work. And then that grinds on you, and then burnout sets in, and then you get sort of cynical or angry or disgruntled or disenfranchised, which leads to more anger, more emotions, and this final pathway, which I think is where I worry most about folks, is when they tell me they feel trapped. Whether it's the handcuffs, golden handcuffs, whatever you want to call it, but they feel trapped. And I don't think that that's a feeling that most humans like and do well with, this feeling sort of trapped, feeling like a victim. I always try to coach from the lens of empowerment, which is let's get your power back, and then we can start making better decisions and have more optionality. Because I don't know what you need for your life, only you know that. But what I do know is not having any options is problematic, because to solve problems, the more options you have, the higher likelihood of success.
So one way that coaching can be helpful is to get people's power back. And another way to look at that is also a sense of agency, getting agency back. There's two questions here. One is, are there other things that you see where coaching has a role in healthcare professional well-being? But probably even more important than that is, how do we avail, especially physicians, that this is something that they can do? How to get them to the table of coaching that could be helpful to them.
I think to your first question, my most valuable commodity, we just got done talking about money, but my most valuable commodity is time. With a young family at home, I'll make less money as long as I have time to be with them. This issue of time is sort of interesting because, again, we've been conditioned to have really time lose all meaning. And it's the same thing sort of with money, right? Most of my life, I just signed a student loan thing, and these numbers were funny money. It's the same thing with time. For most of my life, it just sort of, my time wasn't my own. You're in med school, you're in residency, you're where you're supposed to be. They tell you where to be and how long you're going to be there. And so you sort of forget that you are in control of your time eventually, at least somewhat. And the question really is, how do you want to use it? We talk a lot about scarcity mindset. And I think it's sort of bred into us, this idea of scarcity, when really, once you're a physician, you actually are living in an abundance mentality. But to shift that mind is so hard because it's really been ingrained in us. That we should be grateful for everything and that we're just lucky to have a seat. But really, you do have a ton of power eventually. It's just a question of, can you yield it and can you use it? And, so many people that I see are collectors, is what I call them, is we'll go through their professional responsibilities and what they're involved in. And their email insignia is, 12 paragraphs long with director of this, director of that, member of this. And I was like, how do you do all that? Not well. I said, well, would you rather just do a few things well than 50 things poorly? And he said, oh, I'd love that, but I don't think I can. And I said, well, okay, let's explore that. And so this issue of allocating your time intentionally with where you get pleasure, what it's truly going to advance your career, right? I think this idea of saying no is super important for coaching. Is I don't think, and I'm not somebody who believes you should say no at different phases of your career very much. You should be very selective about where you say no early in your career, especially. But you do have to say no eventually to certain things if your brand is going to be quality.
Making physicians aware of resources that are available to them, including coaching. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I struggle a little bit. It's interesting. When I started this journey and I became a coach, I actually became a coach because I was sort of annoyed the coaching idea as a psychiatrist, as a therapist. It's like, what are these people? Are these people just getting to do therapy without having to do what I had to do to be able to say I can do therapy, really? And so I actually didn't go to get my coaching certification because I wanted to be a coach. I was sort of there because I was like, I just need to find out who these people are and what kind of training they get. What I came to realize was it can be different. It is important to actually learn the skills. I do believe that. I think, unfortunately, it's pretty easy to hang your shingle and say you're a coach, but not have done any of the training to be a coach. And I think that's a problem for the field. But at the time, so when I finished, I just said, "Oh, I'm a doctor coach," and that's good enough. Now there's so many doctor coaches that you have to have some sort of niche and something that you think you enjoy doing and maybe have skill actually coaching around. Some people think it's nice to find somebody in your own specialty. I'm actually not a big believer in that. I think it's actually really fun to have somebody that is not in a specialty that I'm in, because I can come from a total place of curiosity. I don't make any assumptions because I don't know anything about your specialty. Whereas when I'm working with other psychiatrists, I have to catch myself that I'm not 3 steps ahead just because I think I know already what their lives are like. But I think there are easier ways to find folks both internally. A lot of healthcare systems have coaching programs that they are standing up internally. There's also external coaches through things like employee assistance program is out there that are specialized in coaching for healthcare professionals. And then there's folks, doing it as individual private practitioners, or have collectives like yourself, where there's a bunch of coaches that come together and you can take a look at their various resumes and say, who do I seem like I might resonate best with? I think what I hear from coaches or from physicians, I should say, that there's the 2 barriers that people always put up, right? Is cost and time. You have to decide if the investment is worth it. And I don't just mean money. I do believe that the outcome of coaching lands in the coachee's hands, right? I'm there to facilitate, but I can't own the outcome. If you're not present, if you're not thinking about this work, you're not doing stuff in between, then maybe this is not a good time for you. But if you're committed and you want to really explore some of these things, then I do think coaching can be incredibly valuable for folks.
I just wonder, with all the work that you've been involved with in this space, can you share any anecdotes or stories that highlight the importance of this work that you're doing?
What I think I'll tell you there is one of the hardest things about being a chief wellness officer, to me anyway, is that sometimes the problems seem so big. And sometimes the problems seem like they're not in your circle of control, right? If you talk to some people on the ground, they'll say, well, until we blow up the American healthcare system, nothing's going to change. That's not something it's not my circle of control. I don't have much to offer there. or until we totally change the way we pay for healthcare system, nothing's going to change. And I just reject that. I don't believe that to be true. And the reason I don't believe it to be true is I see it every day. And I'm the first to admit, we haven't solved it. We haven't figured it out. We haven't created some idyllic place. But what I do know is there are programs and initiatives that we have run over the last 5 years that people come up to me and say, my day's better. I have joy again in medicine, or you all help to tackle stigma. And I was more at ease about getting mental health care when I needed it, rather than worrying about the problems for my licensure. Yeah, nothing's really changed at work in terms of how many patients I have to see or how many RVUs I have to generate. But through some of the initiatives, I feel closer to my teammates. I feel closer to my nurses. I feel like we are doing better at understanding what each of our roles is and managing my inbox together. And that helps me find joy again and helps me feel empowered again, that I'm not a victim, that I'm a part of making my life and my day-to-day work in a way that is fun and effective and useful.
Listen, I just wonder, I've asked you a lot of questions, and there may be something that you want to impart to listeners that I have not asked you about within this space. Is there something that I haven't asked that you'd like for us to know about?
I would just say, because I believe this is a change management exercise, and I believe that a large driver of well-being problems is the sense of losing autonomy. Those 2 things are intimately related in that we will have to be a part of the change management for the change management to work in this industry. And that is where the autonomy can be gained. I see a fair number of people who say, hey, you know what? I don't like the way that this department's working, or I don't like the way healthcare is going. So, okay, what would we like to fix? I'd like, if I could fix one thing, I'd like to make this better. Okay, great. Let's meet and let's find a time to meet in a week or two. Let's get a little small group together and try to work on it. Inevitably, that person doesn't show up. And I get it. We're all very busy. But if you want to be a part of the solution, you want to have that autonomy back, then we will have to be a part of the change so that the design is actually informed by the people that live it every day. And so I would just say there is this moment post-pandemic where I think this stuff matters deeply. And there is momentum and there is desire to continue to see things get better. I think this is the time to seize that opportunity to be a part of the change.
I'd like to extend my deepest thanks to Dr. Gaurav Agarwal for being a guest on Life-Changing Moments. His focus on the systemic issues impacting workplace well-being, often difficult to identify and address, is truly inspirational. By shedding light on how these systemic factors contribute to the well-being and mental health challenges of healthcare professionals, rather than placing the responsibility solely on individuals, he's making a significant impact on the national conversation about treating healthcare professionals with greater humanity and a more holistic approach. Well, with this fourth interview, we bring our Chief Wellness Officer series to a close. Here are my takeaways from this conversation. Since healthcare professional burnout first came into the public eye in 2012, we've seen its alarming rise and now, thankfully, at least a plateau. It's refreshing and encouraging to witness the growing resources and attention being directed toward improving the lives of frontline healthcare workers. The chief wellness officers I've had the privilege of interviewing in this series are tackling the difficult task of untangling the complex and entrenched bureaucracy that has increasingly stood between clinicians and the patient relationships that drew them to medicine in the first place. Their work is not just challenging, it's courageous. Despite the incremental nature of change, these four spirited individuals give me genuine optimism for the future. Their dedication to making a difference is a beacon of hope in what can sometimes feel like a daunting landscape. And that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Moments. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another inspiring conversation. Until then, take care and be well. Thank you for tuning in to Life-Changing Moments. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate us 5 stars and leave a review. Doing so helps our podcast reach more listeners. Have something to share? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Visit the MD Coaches community on Facebook groups. This dynamic virtual space is a place to continue discussion about life-changing moments and perhaps share some life-changing moments of your own. Join the conversation today.